John Conley, who was Whitey Bulger's handler, the FBI agent, was also a very good source of mine. And it was a period of years in which I kept asking. After the mafia leadership was taken out in 1983, it was pretty obvious that's what I did for a living. I covered organized crime. I covered criminals. It was obvious that Whitey Bulger and his partner, Stevie Fleming, were the biggest criminals in town. But whenever I would ask Conley about it, he would steer me away from the conversation. He would say that they were going to retire, that they really weren't involved. And I was getting a completely different vibe from state police, DEA, Boston police sources of mine, who said that Whitey and Stevie were killing everybody and that they were running the town now that the Italians were taken out. So it was a combination of my own sense of what was going on, but particularly what other people in law enforcement were telling me. So in 1988, I went to Jack Driscoll, the editor of the Boston Globe, and said, I don't know how to explain this, and I don't know if I can prove it, but I believe Whitey Bulger is an FBI informant. It's the only plausible explanation of why the FBI won't go after him. Well, right before Jack Driscoll convened a spotlight team investigation, put me on the spotlight team, our dedicated investigative unit with Jerry O'Neill, Dick Lear, Chris Chinlin, and a researcher, Mary Beth Knox. And we just spent 6 months really running at both to explain the relationship of Bill Bulger, the powerful politician, Senate president, and his gangster brother. And obviously a big part of that was proving that Whitey was in fact an informant to the FBI. And shortly before we went to publication with that, an FBI agent from the Organized Crime Squad called me and said if we put that in the paper, I'd be murdered. I changed my pants. I went to see Jerry O'Neill. He said, write a memo. I wrote a contemporaneous memo. We came to the conclusion after a lot of debate within the Globe that it was an attempt by the Globe attempt by the FBI to scare us off the story. And they did a pretty good job because I was a little worried. I was more worried for my wife too, to be honest, because we lived in South Boston. We lived in the middle of Whitey Bulger's lair. And, I didn't know how serious the threat is. So to make a long story short, and this is a very Boston story, we decided right before the story came out that my wife and I would leave our home in South Boston, and the Globe relocated us to Harvard Square, 9 stops down the Red Belt line. As I said, how would he find us here? And we ended up, first we were in the Sheraton Commander for a short period of time. And after about 3 nights there, I said to my wife, I said, listen, if my life is in danger, I'm not staying at the Sheraton Commander, let's go. And we moved into the Charles Hotel for a week. In the end, Jack O'Malley, a very good state cop, told us that his informant had, very close to the Bulger organization, said that Whitey wasn't mad about the story that said he was an informant because he said nobody would believe it, that the Globe was just doing this to get at his politician brother, and everybody, including the wise guys, the mafia, would see it for that. And so my wife and I moved back to South Boston. I felt it really didn't even matter what I felt like. I thought it was great for the families, his victims, to be able to see him in court and see that. That said, I don't think the trial was a terrific exercise in truth-telling or truth establishment. We knew the parameters of the story. The case had been played out in civil court, it played out in other criminal trials, and it played out in great detail in a fine book called Whitey Bulger, written by my friend Shelley Murphy and myself. And so we knew the parameters of the story. I was hoping a lot more information would come out in the trial, but that wasn't where the government was prepared to go. And for all his boasting about how he would tell the real story, in the end of the day, Whitey Bulger didn't have the courage to get on the stand and give his side of the story because he didn't want to be reminded that, he spent his whole trial saying, I didn't kill the women and I'm no rat, I'm not an informant. That wasn't even one of the crimes. But he had spent his entire criminal life creating this false narrative of him being a good bad guy, a gangster with scruples. Well, gangsters with scruples don't murder 26-year-old women and bury them in secret graves, and they certainly don't inform on their friends, but Whitey did both. And so he didn't have the courage to get up there. I think if he had got up on the stand, I think we would have found a lot more. As it was, there was very little new information that came out of that trial. Well, I think it's sort of like, the way that the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judiciary sort of work as a counterbalance of each other. I think that the media is just, it's the fourth estate. And so it actually impacts all those, I think it, not just the courts, but the legislative branch, the executive branch.